I'm your host, Jill Hewlett. Thank you for joining us. Our special guest this evening is Nobel Prize nominee Dr. Joel Wallach, creator of Dead Doctors Don't Lie. Thank you for joining us again, Dr. Wallach.
Thank you, Jill. Always enjoy your hospitality.
Well, it's great having you. We've had a few shows already, really educating our audience, our viewers, on health, better health, and longevity. And probably to start off the show, it would be great to hear about your background, because I know you have a lot of expertise in this field.
Well, Jill, I think the thing that makes my view different on health is that I'm a veterinarian as well as a physician. And even before I got my degree in veterinary medicine, I got a degree in agriculture and really was taught how to formulate animal rations and develop rations for all kinds of species of animals. And the thing that makes animal rations unique, I think, is that they're in a pelletized form. And the reason why we put animal foods into a pelletized form is so that every mouthful is perfect. Even the stupidest animal in a group gets a perfect diet. They can't sort through and just eat only the sunflower seeds or the raisins. Every mouthful is perfect. And we're not going to let the cow determine the farmer's income by her choices of food. And so I thought that was really a very valuable concept. And we spent $100 billion US over a 70-year period developing that. And we were able to do several things with this concept of complete rations in a pelletized form for animals. Number one, we doubled and tripled the lifespans of animals. Number two, we eliminated 900 different diseases. And I spent a lot of time lecturing to doctors on this concept, wrote scientific papers, 75 of them that appeared in medical journals and veterinary journals on this story. Actually, was in 1,700 newspapers around the world. It became a public story. It was on 2020.
Really?
Yes, this was back probably before you were born, I think when they first came out, 2020. And despite all the scientific exposure and public exposure, I couldn't get people who are in a position of authority, either in medical research or the government, to get too excited about preventing and curing diseases in people with nutritional formulas like we did in animals.
And this was, like you discovered, without a shadow of a doubt, that with the animals, by feeding them the proper pellets with the proper rations of minerals and proteins and various elements,
perfect mix.
That the animals would stay healthy and live longer?
Stay healthy. Again, we could double and triple their lifespans. For instance, 60 years ago, Jill, an old dog was 10. Today an old dog is 20. 60 years ago, an old cat was 12. Today an old cat's 25. 60 years ago, laboratory rats lived to be maybe 2. Now they live to be 12. And simply because we put vitamins and minerals into their food. We didn't do that with genetic engineering. We didn't do that with stem cell research. We didn't do it with wonder drugs. We didn't do it with heart transplants. We did it simply by regulating the amount of vitamins and minerals and trace minerals, rare earths, amino acids, essential fatty acids, proteins, and their relative relationships. And again, this works in animals because we homogenize their food. In other words, we grind up their food into a fine flour, if you will, and this is all compacted into a pellet, and they don't have choices.
Right, and with the choices in today's grocery stores and in today's advertising, people are really inundated with almost too many choices and too many unhealthy choices.
That's right. The foods in the market, even if they're fresh foods, are there because of things that we've done to them, either genetic engineering or chemicals, so that they will have better shelf life and better appearance. Nobody's paid attention to the nutritional value of these foods.
Right.
And even going back further, going back to my days in the agricultural school, it was very obvious that the nature of agricultural science was to make sure that farmers maximize their yields in terms of tons and bushels per acre of ground. And to do that, they gave the plants the optimal amount of nutrients the plant needed. And when I'd ask them the question, well, what about the consumer of the plant? For instance, plants only need 9 minerals. We need 60. And so if you're very, very good at making sure the plant gets 9 minerals and you get maximum yields per acre, what does that say for the user who needs 60? Where are they going to get the other 51?
Right. If the plants don't have them, if the vegetables don't have them, where are we getting them from?
Exactly, and we're not, and that's why we're sick, and that's why your hospitals in Canada and the hospitals in the United States are filled with people who are sick. Most of our illnesses that plague us in Western civilizations are truly mineral deficiency diseases. Even a blind hog gets an acorn sometime. That's an old Missouri saying where I grew up.
That's right. You grew up on a Missouri farm.
Yes, exactly.
Is that what, by the way, is that what inspired you to get into agriculture and veterinarian medicine?
Oh, sure. When boys grew up on farms, when I was a kid, your hero was the veterinarian. So I started out in that direction, sure. They were the one who was out there all the time, and they had the nice truck, and you know, were wearing nice, clean clothes. And they were well groomed and had, you know, all the nice stuff. And so every farm boy wanted to be a veterinarian. And it's just very, very interesting that nobody paid attention to the needs of the consumer. Well, farmers, even my dad, who only had a fourth grade education, was taught by county representatives and also from university representatives that would come out to the farm and say, well, you need to give your animals these minerals so they'll be fertile. If you feed 100 cows, you want 100 pregnancies, you want 100 calves born without cesarean sections. You want these 100 calves to grow up without need for some kind of health care to either go to market or to reach breeding age. You do this by putting these vitamins and minerals in their food. And it was very interesting to me as a kid that we were able to solve all these health problems in animals with nutrition because we didn't have insurance for them. If they got sick and it was a $2 lamb and it cost you $25 to get the veterinarian out to the farm, you just knocked the lamb in the head with a hammer and threw him in the ditch because you were already behind if the lamb got sick.
Right. Okay.
And so we learned how to prevent and reverse these diseases. For instance, we've known how to prevent and cure osteoporosis and arthritis in animals for over 300 years. It's not a mystery. It's just there's no money in it for medical doctors.
So it's the same correlation. I mean, an animal can get depression, osteoporosis, diabetes, and how you
high
deal
blood
with
pressure, Alzheimer's disease.
Really? Heart disease?
Yes.
Amazing. And all these things are dealt with using the proper nutrients in food.
That's correct.
And a farmer knows this, so it's almost like the good old traditional way, the simple way of life is the better way. And you're saying that for people, after you did a number of autopsies on animals to find these nutritional deficiencies, didn't you?
Well, actually it was a big $7.5 million project with the National Institutes of Health. Okay. This was back in the 60s. I mean, today it would be $100 million. I mean, it was like the biggest grant of that time. And the purpose of that was to look at problems with pollution in the environment. But what I found was really pollution was only a problem when a local factory would make a mistake or do something illegal and dump chemicals into the local river or lake or reservoir or put it out into the air. It wasn't generally a nuisance all over. It was just local things that local industries did bad. And the real problem was the nutritional deficiencies. And after 17,500 autopsies on over 454 species of animals and 3,000 human beings, what I learned, Jill, was that every animal and every human being that dies of natural causes, they die of a nutritional deficiency disease. Mm-hmm. And that was really an epiphany for me. That would be. Yes, that was a wake-up call, that every animal and every human being that dies of natural causes, regardless of the species, regardless of the age, they're dying of a nutritional deficiency disease. Mm-hmm. And there were many animals at that time that were classically thought of as impossible. You know, when you talked about pandas, it was impossible to raise them in captivity. When you talked about certain birds and certain reptiles and rare mammals like platypus and koala bears and so forth, it was impossible to raise them in captivity. They just couldn't be done. Well, that was because people had movie theater ideas of what they should eat. Monkeys only ate bananas because that's what they saw in movies, and so that's what zookeepers fed monkeys when they'd come to a zoo. They'd just give them bananas. And of course, within 60 days they would starve to death because there's no protein in bananas. There's very little in the way of minerals. Might have some potassium, but where are you going to get the other 59? And so animals would die of these terrible deficiency diseases. And so most of my time was built creating nutritional formulas for these animals. And so now just about every animal that comes to a zoo lives to the ripe old age, and they reproduce well in zoos. And through that study, we've actually saved enormous numbers of species by being able to not only maintain colonies in zoos, but also have them reproduce well mm-hmm. in zoos. And it was all a nutritional problem. Really?
Now, you were, after that time, that study, creating these formulas and having these positive, successful results, you decided to take this over to the human side of nutrition. How did that change for you? Because I realized you became a primary care physician, a naturopathic doctor.
Well, again, I tried very hard as a veterinarian through publications and lecture tours with seminars that doctors were going to be at and writing scientific articles, trying to get doctors to take on this concept, and they just wouldn't do it. And they'd say silly things like, oh, that's only been proven in animals, it hasn't been proven in people. But they use animals for animal research for pharmaceuticals, and the reason why they use the pharmaceuticals is because pharmaceutical companies in the United States, and I'm sure the percentages are true for Canada too, they certainly are for Australia, I just came back from Australia, that they get paid $14 billion US a year as kickbacks to make sure that Americans are put on these drugs. Well, if I were to pay medical doctors $14 billion a year to make sure they got put on our nutritional formulas, they'd do it. But as long as nobody's paying them, they're not going to do it. And so it's very obvious. It's one of those, if it's to be, it's up to me kind of things. And I knew this was such a very important concept. I went back to school, became a physician, and in 1978 began to use these nutritional formulas in my human patients. And it works just like a charm in people, just like it does in animals. And people who, for instance, have high blood pressure within days or certainly weeks are able to get their blood pressure down in the normal range, even if they've had high blood pressure problems for 35, 40 years. It doesn't matter. Within weeks, it goes back to normal. When people have been on insulin because they have adult onset type 2 diabetes, which is really just a simple mineral deficiency disease, they make plenty of insulin, and they make up 95% of the diabetic population, adult onset type 2 diabetics. And it's a crisis around the world. There's more and more diabetics showing up, and just giving people with diabetes insulin doesn't solve the basic problem. But if you give them these trace minerals that are required for their own insulin to work, it just goes away and they're able to go back to a normal life.
It's amazing how the body can heal itself, given the proper nutrients.
Exactly.
And I think a really big message to get across that I know is a big part of what you have to share with the public is that the regular fruits and vegetables these days don't have the mineral components in it because it's not in the soil. So a vegetable, a plant, can't extrapolate something from the soil that's not in it.
Right. Well, the problem people have is doctors have been telling their patients since time immemorial, just eat right. You'll get everything you need by eating your basic 4 food groups. And that philosophy is kind of ingrained in the Western mind that you can get everything you need just by eating well. And people go to a great deal of effort to pick out the nicest looking fruits and vegetables and get 10-grain breads and all this, that, and the other. But the problem is, Jill, plants cannot manufacture minerals like they do vitamins. Plants can manufacture vitamins. They do. They manufacture vitamin A and beta-carotene, all the B vitamins, and C and E and D and K and biotin and folic acid, and they manufacture the essential fatty acids. The grains can do that. They manufacture things like phytonutrients, like luteins and lycopenes, things that we know that are necessary to reduce our risk of cancers and so forth. But they can't manufacture minerals. And that's the limiting factor. And there's over 600 different diseases that are caused by mineral deficiencies.
Mineral deficiencies. And
600 diseases.
And the minerals are the building blocks, then, of our health.
Yes, there's nothing that can take place in your body without one or more mineral cofactors. You cannot utilize oxygen, energy, DNA, RNA, chromosomes, hormones, vitamins, proteins, carbohydrates, fats, enzymes. Nothing in your body works, nothing, without mineral cofactors. And this is the limiting factor in our health. And as you point out, not only can plants not manufacture minerals, but there are places in our soil where they've never been. In some places in our soil there's lots of iron, but 59 minerals are missing. In some places our soils, say 100 years ago or 500 years ago, had maybe 15 different minerals in them, but because we've grown crops there over and over and over, we've only put in basic fertilizer that made the plants happy. Now instead of being 15 minerals in the soil, there might be 8, and there might only be 10% of what there was 100 years ago, or maybe none.
Oh, I saw actually a news broadcast on CNN literally saying that it is proven, scientifically proven, that our soil is depleted about 40 to 50% of what was in the soil only 40 years ago.
Yes.
So at that rate, whatever was there is quickly disappearing. And like you said, some soil never even had certain minerals to begin with. And so is it possible to get too much of a mineral? Is that possible as well?
I suppose you can. but I don't worry about that too much. It's very difficult to do that. You know, as far as eating food and supplementing, you can't, well, yes, I suppose you could, but most people couldn't afford to overdose.
Okay, so it's more depletion that we're talking about here.
It's a very, very big problem is depletion. We're not worried about too much of anything.
Okay, and it's my understanding that a child gets the minerals originally from his or her mother. So the mother, a mother who's pregnant, is actually losing minerals by giving her a supply of her storage to the offspring.
If she has them.
If she, exactly, but she can't give what she doesn't have.
That's right.
So the baby can only take as much as is available, and then the whole growth of the child and everything from teeth to skin to hair to all the inner functions.
Liver and heart and kidneys
exactly, all the
and
major
bones
organs and bones can only grow to the degree to which that infant has these minerals. And the great part about your program and your message is that people can literally, by taking these minerals, start to grow things that A, were never growing, or B, they had lost or over time started to lose, and then grow it back. Is that correct?
People, for instance, Jill, can, if they have had maybe adult onset type diabetes from the time they're 12 and they're now 60 years old, they supplement properly, they can go back to normal. If they've had high blood pressure for 50 years, they take the proper supplement program, they go back to normal.
Isn't that exciting?
Yes, it is. And if you've had people come to me and they say, well, I've had arthritis for 25 years, so what? You take the right nutrients and within a month or so your body's rebuilt the hips and the knees and the necks and the vertebrae and the shoulders. And
what a miracle of life that we are. You know, what I'd like to do is take a commercial break and after speak to the fact that people who are on fitness programs, that's great. However, if they're not getting the minerals, they're still in jeopardy. People who are vegetarian, that's fine if they want to be spiritual and practice certain methodologies.
They have to do it in an educated way.
If they don't do it with the minerals and the proper nourishment, then they're still going to be in lack. And I was interested when you had brought that to our attention on various other shows. So let's take a break.
Happy to talk about it.
Okay, we'll see you in a minute. Welcome back to the second half of our Body, Mind, Spirit, Emotion program. In studio this evening, we have Dr. Joel Wallach, Nobel Prize nominee, author and creator of Dead Doctors Don't Lie, along with hundreds of scientific research papers. Thank you again for joining us. It's a pleasure.
Well, thank you for having me, Jill.
Well, we were talking earlier in the first part of our program about people who may be very fit and spiritually oriented, and that's great. However, if they're not having the proper nourishment or minerals, mineral components, then they will have maybe a spiritual life, but a shorter life, you're saying?
Well, basically, if you look at the statistics, Jill, there's never been a professional athlete ever lived to be 100. And if exercise alone, for instance, were the answer to health and longevity, there should be a significant number of professional athletes living to be 100. They get paid to do it, so they're not going to slough off, right? And what we've learned is that humans sweat, and things are called essential because you use them up and you need more. And if you don't have enough of them, you get some disease. And there's certain things that accelerate the loss of these nutrients from your body. One of them is physical activity, whether you're doing Tai Chi or you're a 100-yard dash runner or a marathon runner or a boxer or a hockey player or a soccer player, whatever it is you do, if you're sweating, you're losing nutrients. And if you don't replace them, you're actually going to shorten your life. And so this is things we know. We know that people who spend their lives doing spiritual pursuits, they're very nice people, but they don't necessarily live to be 120. Right. Many people who are very spiritually motivated and very spiritually successful in being great spiritual leaders for their communities tragically die in their 50s, 60s, and 70s because they're not paying attention to their physical needs. And this is where a conscious education of these needs of our body, both our physical and biochemical needs, is so important. And then these people who do the nice things, such as fitness training and spiritual practices, should be able to live to be 200 if they're doing everything right. But they do have to supplement because plants cannot, it always comes back to plants cannot make minerals. Nutritional minerals do not occur in a uniform blanket around the crust of the earth. They occur in veins like chocolate and chocolate ripple ice cream or maybe gold and silver. And so the odds of people getting everything they need in the optimal levels just from eating well is zero. I don't care if you spend $1 million a day for food and eat the very best beluga caviar and the Australian wines and, you know, all the stuff that you might do, the most exotic imported artichoke hearts and nice fruit, you're still not going to get everything you need, even if you spend $1 million a day for food.
Right, so whether you're vegetarian or not, or spiritual or not, or exercising or not, if you're not getting these mineral supplements,
I guarantee you're not going to get
then
it, yeah.
You're not going to get them from the regular
That's right.
diet. Then if you're not getting them elsewhere, then you're in lack. And you do believe that people can live to over 120 years old?
Well, it's proven, Jill. There's no doubt that people can do very well for a variety of reasons. There's peoples all over the earth whose average lifespans far exceed Canadians and Americans' lifespans. Our average lifespan is somewhere around 75, and there's peoples whose average lifespan is 83, and just about 8 years longer than we do. And they're third world countries, and they don't even have health care systems. They have no access to Western medicine whatsoever, and on the average they live 8 years longer than we do. They have 4 times as many 100-year-olds per 100,000 population than we do, and yet they have no access to Western medicine. So without doing a whole lot of extra research, you just have to look at those simple little statistics and say, whoops, we got a problem here. You know, between Canada and the United States, we spend more money than all the other countries in the world put together for health, and yet we're nowhere near as close to being number 1 and 2.
Doesn't that tell you something?
Yes.
Amazing.
And the people who live the longest tend to be the ones who are furthest from what's considered good medical care.
Practice, right?
Yeah. And so in most cases, it was a serendipitous thing, an accidental thing. They chose places to live for security, and it just so happened in that location there was 60 minerals or 72 minerals in their soils, or maybe in the rocks or the mountains. And as they use the irrigation water from these mountains for their fields, every week they're putting the minerals back in their soil. Okay, and so they have a source of minerals. Every culture, I'm going to be bold here, every culture who has the highest average lifespans and more 100-year-olds than we do, and that includes Okinawans and Hunzas and Vilcabambas and certain Tibetans and Russian Georges and people like this, every culture who lives at long lives has a source of constant mineral renewal in their soil.
A source of constant mineral renewal.
That's correct.
Wonderful.
Whereas we don't have in the high plains and the Great Plains of Canada where you grow wheat, where's the mineral renewal coming from? Nowhere. What was there 500 years ago is no longer there.
Right, and then with all the pesticides and various chemicals used to...
Puts extra pressure on our physiology, no doubt about it. When that happens, you need more nutrients.
Right, because when we're dealing with day-to-day stress and pollutants and environmental toxicity, our body is using these minerals, which we may already be in lack of, to deal with this. And so what you're saying is already, if we're in lack and we're using the very minimal stores that we do have to combat day-to-day life, then really there's no way that a person can promote better health or longevity.
That is correct. And experts in genetics and gerontology, human longevity, tell us we've always had the genetic capacity to live well beyond 100. And even today with the Guinness World Book of Record, they show people live to be 122 and a half, 124. These are some of the great records that the Guinness World Book of Records has shown. And by studying their genes and studying the genes of the average person on the street, they say, hey, we all have the same genes, so we all have the genetic capacity to live well beyond 100. But it's because we're lacking these essential nutrients for our day-to-day physiology to work on all 8 cylinders or in a maximum or optimal way, our inability to do that shortens our life. Just because we have the genetics to live to be 120 doesn't mean we're going to make it if we're not taking in the raw materials to get there.
So you're speaking to our human potential.
That's right.
And isn't that inspiring?
Yes.
Because this is what this show is about, is to educate, uplift, and enlighten people on alternatives and ways to improve their life in all areas.
And meet that potential.
And meet it. If we don't have our health, we certainly don't feel wealthy in any other way.
That's
so
correct.
Health is everything.
That's correct. And people have to come to grips with this, Jill. There is no other way. They can go to space, and without nutrients, they're going to, when they come back, they have all this muscle wasting and, living on food out of a toothpaste container, which doesn't have all the nutrients in it. They still come back. They have muscle wasting and weakness and so forth just after a couple of months in space. And that's because they're lacking in the nutrients, because the government scientists are not really close to knowing what they need to know because they haven't incorporated veterinary nutritional science, unfortunately.
And it sounds like typically science likes to strive forward to get answers that are ahead of our time without being here now dealing with the issues at hand.
The basic needs.
The basic needs, which thanks to you growing up on a Missouri farm and your studies as a veterinarian doctor, you were able to quickly see the lack and discover a way to deal with it through your program with the longevity products.
Yes, and of course we've been doing this since 1978, Jill, and we have a lot of experience. It's 25 years we have this experience, and so we've been able to evolve our program so that it's pretty close to perfect now, really. We're very, very proud of this program, and when we give people all the known essential nutrients, the vitamins, the amino acids, the essential fatty acids, the minerals, major minerals, electrolytes, trace minerals, rare earths, people do extremely well. They will blossom, they will meet their potential for longevity. And we see this in certain peoples who do live 10 years longer than Americans simply by doing the right things.
Isn't this fantastic? And your wife's a doctor as well, so it's a family run team. And I have to say my parents are very big advocates of your work. They've had results personally and professionally through sharing your resources, your books, your tapes, your lectures, and your products with clients and friends and other family members.
Good. Well, I know your parents are nice people.
And you call my father, I think it's the head coach.
Yes, the head coach.
Why is that?
Well, he's known locally as coach, but since he is one of our sort of leaders in Canada, if you will, kind of leading the way for Canadians, I would like to call him head coach to lift him beyond just the average coach.
That's great, great. I'm sure he appreciates that. And you're being well received in Canada and internationally, so I really want to put out there that your message is for everyone, everywhere.
It's universal. If you're a human being, you need all the known essential nutrients. It doesn't matter if you're a Brit or a Canadian or an American or an Australian or a New Zealander or Japanese or Chinese. They all have the same diseases. They all have the same needs. Given the same supplement program, they all are healthier and live longer.
Wonderful. Well said, well said. So for further information, we're going to give a local number for people, our viewers, to contact, and we welcome them to call and get further information. And when you're in town, as you are occasionally, we really appreciate when you're here sharing your information, your time, and your energy.
Thank you. Always appreciate your hospitality.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sure we'll see you again real soon.
Okay.
Thank you. And thank you for joining the Body, Mind, Spirit, Motion program. I'm your host, Jill Hewlett, and we'll see you again next week.